To 20-year-old Emily, facing mounting bills and a stressful job market, the attic was just a dusty storage unit. The items stored there were simply clutter easy cash waiting to happen. The solution to her financial problem was simple: sell her great-grandmother's delicate porcelain teacup set, a heavy underwood typewriter, and a pair of stained glass lamps. To her, history didn't pay the electric bill, but to her mother, Linda, those objects weren't for sale. The teacups were a wedding gift from 1932, a vessel for a lifetime of family stories. Listing them for sale wasn't just a financial transaction, it was a desecration, a public dismissal of the love and history that built their home. When Linda discovers the listings on the open laptop, her reaction isn't the screaming argument Emily expected. It's a terrifying, cold dread that settles into a steely resolve. She confronts Emily, and the argument quickly spirals from finances to the profound weight of family honor. Linda knew that a lecture wouldn't work. For such a deep, careless disrespect of their family's heritage, she chose a rare, physical manifestation of the boundary, a firm, traditional paddling. This wasn't about control or pain. It was a shocking, visceral symbolic gesture designed to break through the adult's arrogance and force the realization that she had hurt her mother in a way she hadn't even considered. Watch how an old-fashioned discipline helps a daughter understand that sometimes the greatest treasures aren't what they're worth, but the stories they hold. Asterisk, Emily sighed, running a hand through her messy bun. The soft cotton of her faded brown t-shirt was a small comfort against her skin. Her wide-legged jeans, a thrift store find she'd lovingly patched at the knee, felt heavy with the weight of her worry. "Think, Emily, think," she muttered to herself, her eyes scanning the room. An idea, sharp and desperate, sparked in her mind. It's just clutter. She had argued once, to which her mother had simply replied, "It's our history, sweetheart." But history didn't pay the electric bill. Emily grabbed her phone and a small flashlight and crept up the creaky stairs to the attic. The air was thick with the scent of aged wood and dust. In the beam of her flashlight, treasures emerged from the shadows. A heavy black underwood typewriter, its keys yellowed with age. A pair of ornate brass and stained glass lamps. And on a high shelf, wrapped in yellowed tissue paper, her great-grandmother's porcelain teacup set, its delicate floral pattern still vibrant. Vintage porcelain teacup and saucer, set $75 oboe. She uploaded the photo, her heart pounding with a mix of guilt and hope. Finally, the lamps. Gorgeous pair of vintage brass and stained glass table lamps. She hit post on all 3 listings and leaned back in her chair. Emily didn't know the full story behind the items she just listed for sale. To her mother, Linda, the teacup set wasn't just porcelain. It was the story of her own grandmother, Eleanor, who had received it as a wedding gift in 1932. Selling these items wasn't just a financial transaction to Linda, it felt like a desecration, a dismissal of the love and history that had built their family. Emily had left her laptop open on the kitchen table while she went to take a quick shower. Linda, coming in to get a glass of water, glanced at the screen. The Marketplace app was still open, and the first thing she saw was the photo of her mother's teacups listed for sale. Her breath caught in her throat. A cold dread, sharp and immediate, flooded her system. She clicked on the listing, her heart hammering against her ribs. Then she saw the typewriter and the lamps. Her hands began to tremble. How could she be so thoughtless? When Emily came downstairs, her hair damp and wrapped in a towel, she found her mother standing in the kitchen, her back rigid, her face pale. The laptop was closed, but the tension in the air was thick enough to choke on. "Emily," Linda said, her voice dangerously calm. "What is this about selling my things?" Emily's stomach dropped. "Oh, you saw that?" She tried to sound casual, leaning against the doorframe. "Yeah, I just thought they're not being used, right?" I'm a little short on rent, and I figured it was a win-win. Someone will appreciate them, and I can pay my bills. Appreciate them, Linda's voice cracked, the calm facade shattering. It's just stuff. Mom, Emily retorted, her own frustration bubbling over. Stories don't keep a roof over my head. I'm trying to be an adult here, and you're acting like I stole a piece of your soul. Go to your room, Linda said, her voice low and firm, leaving no room for argument. Now, Emily scoffed. But something in her mother's green eyes, the same color as her dress, but now blazing with an intensity she hadn't seen since she was a child, made her hesitate. She turned and walked slowly down the hall. Linda followed. She didn't say a word as she entered Emily's room. She simply pointed to the edge of the bed. The message was clear. Emily's eyes widened in disbelief. You're not serious. I am absolutely serious, Linda said, her voice steady. You have shown a complete disregard for our family, for our history, and for my authority in this home. You need to understand the weight of what you've done. What followed was not a brutal beating, but a firm traditional paddling, a series of sharp, stinging swats that were more about the shock of the act than the physical pain. It was a symbolic gesture, a physical manifestation of the boundary Emily had so carelessly trampled. Emily, stunned into silence, felt a wave of humiliation and a strange, old-fashioned sense of justice. It was a feeling from her childhood, a feeling of having truly, deeply disappointed her mother. The tears that welled in her eyes weren't just from the sting, but from the sudden, jarring realization that she had hurt her mother in a way she hadn't even considered. Emily spent the next hour in her room, a mix of anger, shame, and confusion swirling inside her. Her backside felt on fire, but the emotional sting was far worse. She heard her mother moving quietly around the house, the sound of a teacup being placed on a saucer, curious and still upset. She crept to her doorway and peered down the hall. In that moment, the last of Emily's defensiveness crumbled. She finally saw it. She saw the teacup not as a decorative object, but as a vessel for a lifetime of love, of Sunday rituals, of a family's quiet endurance. She saw the typewriter not as a cool vintage piece, but as the tool her grandfather used to express a love so deep he could only write it down. Her mother's discipline hadn't been about control. It had been a desperate, visceral attempt to make her see. Her heart ached with remorse. She went back to her laptop, her fingers flying over the keys. She canceled all 3 listings, her apology message to the few interested buyers brief but sincere. Then she walked slowly into the living room and sat on the floor at her mother's feet. I'm so sorry, Mom, she whispered, her voice thick with tears. I didn't understand. I really didn't. Linda looked down at her, her own eyes red-rimmed but softening. She reached out and brushed a strand of hair from Emily's face. I know you didn't, sweetheart, but now you do. The next weekend was spent not in the attic, but in the living room. Together, mother and daughter carefully cleaned and polished the heirlooms. Emily, now wearing a soft sweater over her blue t-shirt, handled the teacups with a reverence she'd never shown before. Linda, in her green dress, showed her how to gently oil the typewriter's keys. Instead of hiding them away, they decided to give them a place of honor. The teacup set was displayed on a new glass shelf in the dining room where the sunlight could catch its delicate pattern. The typewriter found a home on a small desk in the corner of the living room, a stack of fresh paper beside it. The lamps were placed on either side of the sofa, their warm stained glass glow casting a cozy, nostalgic light over the entire space. Emily had another idea. She set up her camera and took a beautiful, respectful photo of the typewriter, not for a sales listing, but for a new blog she'd started. She titled the first post, "The Stories in Our Stuff, Why My Family's Clutter is My Greatest Treasure." In it, she told the story of her great-grandmother's teacups and her grandfather's love letters. weaving their history into a narrative that was both personal and universal. A few weeks later, Linda found Emily in the living room, her fingers tentatively pressing the keys of the old underwood. Clack, clack, clack. The sound was slow and deliberate, but it was a start. Linda smiled, a deep, quiet smile of contentment. Her daughter hadn't just learned a lesson about respect. She had begun to write her own chapter in their family's ongoing story, the past and the present, in their own imperfect, loving way, had finally found a place to coexist. Before you go, join the discussion. Do you believe? Linda's use of paddling was justified as a visceral attempt to make her see the weight of disrespecting family history. Or was there another way to get through to Emily? What family heirloom do you own that means more for its story than its monetary value? And why would selling it feel like a betrayal? If you were Emily, how would you have handled the rent shortfall without resorting to selling the heirlooms?